The massive crystalline towers of Zephyr Prime stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, the war room hummed with quiet efficiency. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps that covered the entire galaxy. Each dot of light represented a world under hegemony control, and there were millions of them. Commander Vextel stood motionless before the largest screen. His reptilian skin gleamed under the blue light, and his forearms remained perfectly still behind his back. He had served the hegemony for 3 centuries, and in all that time he had never seen defeat. The galaxy belonged to them, and it would always belong to them. "Commander," came a voice from behind him. Lieutenant Morden approached with measured steps, his clawed feet clicking against the polished floor. "We have received another surrender request." Vexel's head turned slightly. His yellow eyes, large and unblinking, focused on his aide. "Which system, Kalari Prime, sir?" "They watched our demonstration on Proxima 7 last cycle. The entire planetary government is requesting immediate integration into the hegemony." Commander's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. Of course they did. Fear travels faster than our ships. The method was always the same. A hegemony fleet would arrive at the edge of a star system and broadcast a simple message: surrender or face destruction. To prove their power, they would select a moon or a large asteroid and obliterate it completely. The massive explosion could be seen from every world in the system. After witnessing such power, most species immediately surrendered. "How many worlds?" "Is that this cycle?" Vexel asked. 47, sir, all without firing a single shot. The commander walked to another display, showing the hegemony's expansion over the past 1,000 years. Red dots marked their territory, spreading outward, from Zephyr Prime like a vast infection. Each dot represented billions of beings who had learned to kneel before hegemony might. "The Council of Overlords will be pleased," Vexel said. "Perfect order requires perfect obedience." In the lower levels of the tower, thousands of technicians monitored the Empire's vast network. Communication arrays carried orders across the galaxy in minutes. Transport ships moved resources from conquered worlds to hegemony core systems. Military bases on every world ensured that rebellion was impossible. The hegemony had perfected the art of control. They took the strongest members of each conquered species and trained them as enforcers. They moved populations between worlds to prevent the formation of resistance groups. They controlled all technology, all communication, all travel between systems. Sir Morden continued, "The Kalari are offering their entire military fleet. As tribute, they also wish to provide 10,000 of their best warriors for our forces." "Standard protocol," Vextel replied. "Accept their military assets, relocate their warriors to frontier worlds, assign a garrison to their homeworld." The lieutenant made notes on his datapad. "What about their government?" "Dissolved. A hegemony administrator can resource extraction within 1 standard cycle." This was how the hegemony worked. They did not simply conquer worlds. They absorbed them completely. Local governments disappeared. Traditional ways of life ended. Every conquered species became part of the great machine that powered hegemony expansion. "Commander," another voice called from across the room. "We have a priority transmission from Deep Space Reconnaissance." Vexel turned toward the communications station. "Display it." A new hologram appeared, showing a section of the galaxy's outer spiral arm. A small yellow star pulsed with a soft light, and around it orbited several small worlds. "Designation South 3, sir," the technician reported. "Primitive carbon-based life forms detected. Technology level is pre-stellar. They call themselves humans." The commander studied the display with mild interest. "Population? Approximately 8 billion, sir. They are confined to their single world with only basic space travel capabilities. They have established small colonies on 2 nearby worlds, but nothing significant." "Threat assessment." "Category 7, sir. No threat to hegemony operations. Standard subjugation fleet should complete integration within 2 cycles." Vextel nodded. Another primitive world to add to their collection. In his long career, he had overseen the integration of hundreds of such worlds. The pattern was always the same: shock, fear, surrender, absorption. Assign Fleet 7 to the operation, he ordered. Have them conclude the matter quickly. I want their resources flowing. To our shipyards within the quarter? Yes, sir. Fleet 7 will depart within the day. As the hologram faded, Vextel returned to his position before the main display. The galaxy stretched out before him, a vast map of hegemony power. Soon, another small dot would turn red, marking the absorption of the species called humans. He had no reason to suspect that this small, primitive world would be any different from the thousands that had come before. The humans would see their power, understand their hopelessness, and surrender like all the others. The hegemony had achieved perfection in the art of conquest. No species in galactic history had ever refused their terms. The humans of Sol 3 would simply be the latest addition to their ever-growing empire in the depths of space. Fleet 7 began its journey toward the small blue world, carrying with it the full weight of 1,000 years of unquestioned dominion. The probe ZX-7429 drifted silently through the darkness of space, its sensors scanning everything within 100 light-years. It had been traveling for decades, sending back data about distant worlds to the Hegemony Command Center. Most of what it found was empty space, dead rocks, or gas giants with no value. But today was different. The probe's instruments detected something unusual around a small yellow star. There was a blue world, the third planet from its sun, and it was alive. The sensors picked up radio signals, heat signatures from cities, and the movement of primitive spacecraft. Interesting, the probe's computer said to itself in a voice no one would ever hear, began recording everything. The blue world was covered mostly with water. Large land masses showed signs of civilization. The probe could see lights on the dark side of the planet, evidence of widespread technology. Primitive, but organized. Species designation: human, the probe recorded. Bipedal mammals, average height, 1.7 meters. Lifespan, approximately 80. Local years. Technology level, nuclear age with basic space travel. The probe watched as small human spacecraft moved between their world and two nearby planets. They had built tiny settlements on their moon and on a red world they called Mars. The structures were crude but functional. Population estimate: 8.2 billion individuals. Government systems: multiple competing nations, military capabilities. Continental. Weapons only. No energy shields detected. No faster than light travel. Back on Zephyr Prime, tactical analyst Quindare received the probe's data transmission. He sat in his office, high above the city, surrounded by screens showing information from across the galaxy. The data from Sol 3 appeared on his main display. Quindare was a member of the Kellery species, one of the first to be conquered by the hegemony 800 years ago. His people had surrendered after watching the hegemony destroy 3 of their moons. Now he served as conquerors faithfully, analyzing potential worlds for integration. Another primitive world, he muttered, scrolling through the human data. They fight among themselves constantly. Perfect candidates for integration. The probe's images showed human cities, human vehicles, human spacecraft. Everything looked so small and fragile compared to hegemony technology. Their largest cities could fit inside a single hegemony battleship. Their most powerful weapons could barely scratch hegemony armor. Classification: Category 7. Quindare typed into his report. Minimal strategic value. Standard subjugation protocols recommended. He paused to study an image of humans themselves. They looked somewhat similar to his own species, but softer. Weaker. They had no natural armor, no claws, no protective scales. They seemed to rely entirely on their primitive tools and weapons. Commander Vextel, Quindare said, activating the communication system. I have another Category 7 world for your review. The commander's image appeared on the screen. Details: Sol 3, outer spiral arm, humans, 8 billion population confined. 2. 1 system, pre-stellar technology. They should integrate easily. Vextel barely looked at the tactical display. In his centuries of service, he had overseen the integration of hundreds of similar worlds. The pattern was always the same: primitive species with primitive weapons. who surrendered as soon as they understood the power of the hegemony. "Assign Fleet 7, he said without interest. "Standard deployment, 2 cycles should be sufficient." "Yes." "Sir, shall I prepare the usual demonstration?" "Of course." "Select an appropriate asteroid or moon for destruction. Make sure all humans can observe the display." Quinder made the necessary arrangements. Fleet 7 would travel to the Sol system, destroy a large asteroid to demonstrate their power, then demand immediate surrender. The humans would submit, their governments would be dissolved, and their world would become another red dot on the hegemony map, in the shipyards orbiting Zephyr Prime. Fleet 7 began its preparations. The fleet consisted of 50 warships, each capable of destroying a planet. The flagship was the Dominion's Edge, a massive vessel that had participated in over 200 successful integrations. Captain Montauk received his orders with the same calm efficiency he had shown for the past century. Sal 3 he read from his command screen. Primitive humans. Category 7 threat assessment. He had handled dozens of Category 7 worlds. They were always the easiest assignments. The species were too primitive to understand what they faced, too weak to resist, and too frightened to fight back. "Helm, set course for Sal 3, he ordered. "Standard approach. We should complete this integration ahead of schedule." The crew prepared for another routine mission. The weapons officers checked their systems, though they expected to fire only once to destroy an asteroid. The communication officers prepared the standard surrender demand. The transport ships made ready to carry the first wave of hegemony administrators to the New World as Fleet 7 departed Zephyr Prime. The hegemony's computers calculated the mission's outcome with mathematical precision. The humans would witness their power, understand their hopelessness, and surrender within hours. It was a pattern that had repeated itself across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Not a single member of the hegemony considered that the humans might react differently. In their vast database of conquered species, there was no record of any civilization refusing to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The humans of Sol 3 would be no different from the countless others who had learned to kneel before hegemony might. The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the absolute confidence of 1,000 years of unquestioned victory. Fleet 7 appeared at the edge of the Sol system like a storm cloud blocking out the stars. 50 massive warships materialized from hyperspace, their dark hulls reflecting the light of the distant sun. Each ship was larger than the biggest human cities, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. On Mars, the small human mining colony watched in terror as the alien fleet cast shadows across their red sky. The lunar bases went silent as their inhabitants stared at the impossible sight filling their viewing screens. Throughout the solar system, human voices whispered the same words. "They're here." Captain Morthock stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Edge, watching the primitive human settlements with mild interest. "Begin standard broadcast," he ordered his communications officer. The message that reached Earth was delivered in perfect human languages, translated by computers that had analyzed their radio signals. Commander Vextel's voice echoed across every communication channel on the planet. "Inhabitants of Sol 3, you are now subjects of the Zephyrian hegemony. Surrender your weapons and governments immediately. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures extinction." In the emergency bunker deep beneath Sol, President Quan sat at the head of a table surrounded by the most powerful leaders on Earth. The screens around them showed the alien fleet in all its terrible glory. Chancellor Beek, from the European Union, stared at the images with pale face. Prime Minister Chen from the Asian Coalition gripped his chair with white knuckles. "How long do we have?" asked President Quan. Admiral Park, the military commander, checked his instruments. "They're holding position at the edge of our system. Standard protocol suggests they'll give us time to consider surrender." "Consider?" Chancellor Beek's voice cracked. "Look at those ships. Our entire nuclear arsenal couldn't scratch one of them." "Our analysis confirms it," reported Dr. Lee, the head of Earth's space program. "Their smallest ship has more firepower than our combined militaries. This isn't a war we can win through conventional means." President Quan stood and walked to the main screen. The alien ships hung in space like monuments to impossible power. Then we don't fight conventionally. What do you mean? Asked Prime Minister Chen. We fight as humans have always fought, not just with weapons, but with spirit, with the belief that freedom is worth dying for. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what the president was suggesting. They could surrender and live as slaves, or they could fight and die as free people. The entire human race, whispered Chancellor Beak. We're talking about the extinction of our species. Better extinct than slaves, President Quan replied. What do you say? Are we humans, or are we not? One by one, the leaders nodded. Prime Minister Chen was first. The Asian coalition stands with Earth. Chancellor Beak followed. The European Union will not kneel. Soon, every leader in the room had made the same choice. Admiral Park activated the global communication system. All stations prepare to transmit on all frequencies. President Quan stepped forward. Alien fleet, this is President Quan of Earth. We have received your message and considered your terms. He paused, knowing these words would echo through history. We refuse. On the bridge of the Dominion's edge, Captain Morthok stared at his communication screen in disbelief. In 800 years of service, he had never received such a response. Said what? He asked his communications officer. They refuse. Sir, they will not surrender. Captain Morthok looked to his tactical officer. Are they aware of our capabilities? Yes, sir. Our scans show they have detected our fleet and analyzed our ships. They understand they cannot win. Then why? Captain. Morthok turned to stare at the small blue world that had just defied the might of the hegemony. Why would they choose death? His answer came in the form of action. Across Earth, instead of panic, humans began to organize. Military bases that had been preparing for war against each other suddenly coordinated their defenses. Scientists who had been working on separate projects began sharing their research. Nations that had been enemies for centuries united against a common threat. Sir, reported the tactical officer, we're detecting massive movement on the surface. They're mobilizing their entire military. Captain Morthok watched in amazement as the humans prepared to fight. Their weapons were primitive, their ships were tiny, but they showed no fear. Hidden bases across the planet began launching fighters, small craft that buzzed around the massive alien ships like angry insects. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields, reported the tactical officer. Then why do they keep coming? Wave. After a wave of human fighters launched from Earth, each pilot knew they were flying towards certain death, but they came anyway. Some tried to ram the alien ships. Others fired their pathetic weapons until their ammunition ran out, then kept flying. In formation, refusing to retreat. This makes no sense, Captain Morthok muttered. They know they cannot win. His communications officer looked up from his station. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the human pilots. What are they saying? They're singing, sir. And they're saying things like, for Earth and for freedom, they seem to believe their sacrifice has meaning. Captain Morthok had conquered hundreds of worlds, but he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were choosing death over slavery, and they were doing it with songs on their lips. For the first time in his long career, he was witnessing something that defied all hegemony understanding, a species that valued freedom more than life. Itself, the news traveled through the galaxy like wildfire spreading through dry grass. On distant worlds, in hidden corners of alien cities, and in the deep mines where conquered species worked as slaves, whispers began to spread. Earth had said no to the hegemony. On the mining world of Kepler 44b, Han wiped the sweat from his forehead as he operated the massive drilling equipment. He was one of only 50 humans on this world, brought here years ago when Earth was still unknown to the galaxy. The other miners were from dozens of different species, all conquered by the hegemony, all working together in the deep tunnels beneath the planet's surface. Han called Zexilla, a Kellery female who worked beside him. Her blue skin was covered in rock dust, and her forearms moved quickly as she sorted the extracted minerals. Is it true what they're saying? Han looked around carefully. Hegemony. Guards rarely came this deep into the mines, but speaking about rebellion was dangerous. What are they saying about your homeworld? About Earth? Han's heart began to beat faster. I'd heard rumors, fragments of conversations, but nothing clear. Tell me. Zexdilla moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Say your people were contacted by a hegemony fleet. They say the humans were given the standard surrender demand. And Han asked, though he already suspected the answer. They say your people refused. They say Earth is fighting back. Han felt something he had not felt in years: pride. He thought of his homeworld, that small blue planet he had left behind. The idea that humans were standing up to the hegemony seemed impossible, but it filled him with hope. They said no? Asked Thoric, a massive creature from the Gromel system, who had been listening to their conversation. They're still fighting, Han confirmed, his voice growing stronger. My people are still fighting. The news spread through the minds like electricity through metal. Species that had forgotten the meaning of resistance began to remember what it felt like to say no. The Kalari remembered their proud warrior traditions. The Gromel recalled their ancient songs of freedom. Nixari thought of their homeworld's beautiful cities, now turned into factories for the hegemony. On worlds across the galaxy, the same conversations were happening. In the processing plants of Rigel 7, workers stopped their tasks to share whispered stories of Earth's defiance. On the agricultural worlds of the Vega system, farmers looked up at the sky and wondered if freedom was possible. The hegemony's information networks began to struggle. They tried to block the news, to silence the whispers, but the story was too powerful. For the first time in 1,000 years, conquered species were talking about resistance. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, something remarkable was happening. Dr. Lee worked 18 hours a day in her laboratory, surrounded by pieces of captured hegemony technology. The alien ships that had been shot down in the early battles were being torn apart and studied. Their energy systems are more advanced than ours, she explained to her team of scientists, but they're not magic. They follow the same physical laws we do. The laboratory was filled with the wreckage of alien ships, twisted metal, strange crystals, and devices that hummed with unknown energy. Dr. Lee and her team worked like detectives, trying to understand how everything fit together. Look at this, said Dr. Kim, her assistant, pointing to a glowing crystal. This seems to be their power source. It's incredibly efficient, but the design is actually quite simple. Simple? Dr. Lee examined the crystal carefully. How simple? Simple. Enough that we might be able to replicate it. Give me a week. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. Human scientists and engineers were taking apart alien technology with the same curiosity that had once driven them to split the atom and reach for the stars. What they found surprised them. Their weapons are powerful, reported Colonel Park, from the military research facility, but they're designed for overwhelming force, not precision. They expect their enemies to surrender quickly. What does that mean for us? Asked General Kim. It means they're not used to fighting an enemy. That adapts. Their tactics haven't changed in centuries because they've never needed to change them. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the war. Dr. Lee's team had cracked the secret of hegemony shield technology. More importantly, they had learned how to disrupt it. We can't match their power, Dr. Lee explained to the military commanders. But we can match their technology. We can do something they can't do. What's that? We can change. We can adapt. We can innovate. The first human ships built with captured alien technology lifted off from hidden bases around the world. They were strange vessels, part human engineering and part alien science. They looked like no ship that had ever flown, but they worked. Above Earth's scarred surface, Captain Morthok watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were different now. They moved faster, hit harder, and seemed to predict his fleet's movements. How are they doing this? He asked his tactical officer. Sir, our analysis suggests they're using our own technology against us. But they've modified it, improved it somehow. Improved it? These are primitives. Sir, their adaptation rate is beyond anything in our databases. They're learning from every battle, changing their tactics with each engagement. On Zephyr Prime, Commander Vextel received the reports with disbelief. The humans were not just surviving, they were evolving. Their ships were becoming more dangerous with each passing day. "This is impossible," he told Lieutenant Morden. "No species has ever adapted this quickly to our technology." "Sir, perhaps that's because no species has ever tried. They all surrendered before they had the chance to learn." The galaxy was changing. The whispers were becoming voices, and the voices were becoming songs of freedom. 6 months had passed since Earth first spoke the word that changed everything. No. Now, the galaxy burned with the fire of rebellion. On 300 worlds, beings who had forgotten the meaning of freedom suddenly remembered how to fight. The great crystalline towers of Zephyr Prime no longer gleamed with confidence. Inside the highest spire, the Council of Overlords gathered. In emergency session, the chamber that had once echoed with plans of conquest now filled with the sound of panic. Supreme Overlord Thexmore stood at the center of the room, his ancient form trembling with rage. He had ruled the hegemony for 8 centuries, had watched 1,000 worlds kneel before his power. Now, for the first time in his long life, he felt afraid. "How did this happen?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "How did one primitive world destroy our perfect order?" General Quindor, recently promoted after Vexel's disgrace, stepped forward with a datapad. "Supreme Overlord, the reports are clear. Earth's defiance has inspired uprisings across the galaxy. The Kellerai have retaken their homeworld. Grammel have destroyed our mining operations. Even some of our own garrison worlds are declaring independence. And we end this now," Dexmore hissed. "Send the Death Fleet to Earth. Crack their world in half. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us." But Quindar shook his head. "Supreme Overlord, our tactical analysis suggests that destroying Earth would only make things worse. The humans have become symbols of resistance. If we turn them into martyrs, the rebellions will spread even faster." "Then what do you suggest?" "Negotiation, my lord. For the first time in our history, we may need to make a deal." The word hung in the air like a curse. The hegemony had never negotiated with anyone. They had only demanded, conquered, and absorbed. Meanwhile on Earth, President Quan stood in the rebuilt command center watching the most incredible sight in human history. The main screen showed star maps with red lights blinking across the galaxy. Each light represented a world in rebellion, a species that had chosen freedom over slavery. "The Callery have liberated their entire star system," reported Admiral Park. "The Grammel have taken back their mining worlds. Even species we've never heard of are rising up." Dr. Lee joined them at the display, her lab coat still stained with the work of reverse engineering alien technology. "We're receiving requests for help from 17 different species. They want our technology, our tactics, our guidance." "And what do we tell them?" asked President Quan. "We tell them yes," Dr. Lee replied without hesitation. "We share everything. Our weapons, our shield technology, our battle strategies. We show them that freedom is not just worth fighting, for it's worth sharing." The irony was not lost on any of them. The hegemony had conquered the galaxy by keeping technology to themselves, by making sure no one could match their power. Now Earth was doing the opposite, giving away their hardest-won secrets to anyone who asked. "Sir," Admiral Park interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the hegemony fleet." President Quan straightened. "What do they want now?" "Out there, requesting permission to approach Earth. They say they want to talk." The command center fell silent. In 6 months of war, the hegemony had never asked for anything. They had only demanded and threatened. "Talk," President Quan repeated. "They want to negotiate." "It appears so, sir." President Quan looked at his advisors, then at the star map, showing the galaxy in rebellion. "Tell them they can come. But they come unarmed, and they come alone." 3 days later, a single hegemony ship approached Earth. It was not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel. Its weapons powered down, its shields lowered. For the first time in 1,000 years, the hegemony was coming to ask instead of demand. General Quinder stepped off the transport shuttle onto the surface of Earth. He had expected to find a world destroyed by war, but instead he found something he had never seen before, a planet where different species worked together by choice, not force. Humans, Kalari, Gromel, and dozens of other species moved freely through the streets of the rebuilt cities. They were not prisoners or slaves, but partners in the great work of liberation. "Welcome to Earth," said President Kwan as he met the hegemony delegation. "You wanted to talk, so let's talk." The negotiations lasted for 3 days. The hegemony, facing the collapse of their empire, offered to withdraw from half the galaxy if Earth would stop supporting the rebellions. President Kwan's response was simple: all or nothing. Complete withdrawal, or the fight continues. In the end, the choice was easy. The hegemony could destroy themselves fighting a war they could not win, or they could accept that their age of domination was over. On the former capital world of Zephyr Prime, the last hegemony garrison lowered their weapons and surrendered. The great towers still stood, but they no longer cast shadows of fear across the galaxy. President Kwan addressed the liberated worlds from the same chamber where the overlords had once planned their conquests. "Today we prove that no tyranny, no matter how powerful, can survive when people refuse to kneel. The galaxy is free, not because we destroyed our enemies, but because we chose to stand up." The 1,000-year reign of the Zephyrian hegemony ended not with explosions or battles, but with the quiet dignity of beings who had remembered how to say no. In a cell on Zephyr Prime, former Commander Vextal watched the celebrations through his window. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson, that freedom was not something to be given or taken, it was something to be chosen. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of freedom had begun.